There are moments in music history when lyrics stop being just words and become warnings. With Chester Bennington, many fans believe this is exactly what happened. Lines that once felt like emotional outbursts after his death now sound like chilling premonitions. Listening back, it's hard not to wonder, did Chester already know where his path was leading? If this story's already got you curious, hit like and subscribe. Because when we revisit the final years of Linkin Park, we uncover something haunting. Chester wasn't just writing songs, he was opening his soul, exposing wounds that many around him didn't fully see. Songs like Leave Out All the Rest, Heavy, and One More Light now feel less like tracks on an album, and more like pieces of a farewell letter scattered across melodies. This isn't about sensationalism. It's about connecting the dots between an artist's deepest struggles and the art he left behind. Chester's voice always carried pain, but toward the end that pain grew sharper, more personal, almost unbearable. And yet, in the middle of that storm he kept giving everything on stage, smiling, joking, and delivering performances that masked the weight he was carrying. The tension between what the world saw and what Chester was truly feeling is where our story begins. Tonight, we're going to step into those final years, song by song, to uncover the hidden messages that fans only began to notice after it was too late. Because behind the walls of Linkin Park's sound, Chester was screaming something most people didn't want to hear. To understand Chester's final words, we need to go back to the world that surrounded him. By the mid-2000s, Linkin Park had already become one of the biggest rock bands on the planet. Hybrid Theory and Meteora had defined an entire generation, mixing rap, metal, and raw emotion into anthems of rebellion and pain. For millions of fans, Chester's voice wasn't just music, it was survival. His screams carried their rage, his melodies carried their sorrow. But success came with a heavy price. After reaching unimaginable heights, the band found itself at a crossroads. The nu metal wave that had catapulted them to stardom was fading, and critics were quick to declare that Linkin Park was a band tied to a dying trend. Pressure to evolve, to stay relevant, weighed heavily on them. This wasn't just about experimenting with new sounds, it was about survival in an industry ready to move on. At the center of it all was Chester. Offstage, he was fighting demons far more dangerous than public opinion. His history of trauma, addiction, and depression followed him like a shadow, no matter how many arenas he sold out. While fans saw a rock star at his peak, Chester often saw a fragile man barely holding on. It was during this transition period, when the band shifted from the raw aggression of their early days to more melodic, experimental directions, that Chester's lyrics began to change. They became less about external anger and more about internal collapse. Less about shouting against the world and more about whispering a personal truth. And yet, at the time, most people missed it. Audiences sang along, festivals roared with energy, and critics debated whether Linkin Park had lost their edge. But inside the music, buried between verses and choruses, Chester was leaving behind subtle but devastating messages. This is the stage we need to set. A band redefining itself, a singer unraveling in silence, and lyrics that would later become prophecies. Because only by seeing the world as Chester saw it, caught between global success and personal torment, can we begin to understand the hidden meaning behind the songs that came next. Every story of downfall begins with a rise, and Chester's rise was meteoric. From the moment Hybrid Theory exploded in 2000, his voice became the raw nerve of a generation. He could switch from delicate vulnerability to guttural screams in a heartbeat, embodying the very contradictions his fans lived with every day: strength and fragility, rage and despair, hope and hopelessness.
I don't want to do anything, and I don't feel like doing anything, and I don't like anything.
But hidden in that rise was the seed of what would later come. The higher Linkin Park climbed, the heavier the weight on Chester's shoulders. Fame magnified the pain he already carried, and the pressure to deliver, to the band, to the fans, to the industry, became relentless. Each album was not just a project, it was a battle against time, trends, and his own mental state. As Linkin Park's sound shifted, so did Chester's way of writing. No longer just channeling external aggression, his lyrics began to peel back layers of himself. Songs like Breaking the Habit hinted at self-destruction, while Somewhere I Belong searched desperately for healing. These weren't just songs, they were warnings, subtle confessions disguised as hits. And this is where the story begins to turn. Because what seemed like artistic evolution was, in reality, Chester letting his guard down more and more. His music was no longer a mask for his pain, it was a window into it. Fans celebrated the honesty, critics praised the vulnerability, but very few recognized what it truly meant. Chester wasn't just performing his struggles, he was documenting them in real time. That shift, the moment his art stopped being metaphor and started sounding like testimony, was the first sign. The rise was glorious, but inside it, the storm had already begun. By the time Linkin Park was working on Living Things and later The Hunting Party, subtle cracks in Chester's emotional armor had begun to show. His lyrics shifted from general expressions of frustration to deeply personal confessions. Lines that once seemed like universal anthems of pain now carried a darker, more intimate weight. Messages that only in hindsight would appear like warnings. Fans started noticing the difference. In Leave Out All the Rest, he sang about being remembered after he was gone, a sentiment that felt unusually somber for a chart-topping band. In Heavy, the chorus spoke of unbearable burdens and emotional suffocation. And with One More Light, each track dripped with themes of mortality, guilt, and loss, reflecting a vulnerability that Chester had rarely exposed so openly. It wasn't just the lyrics. Interviews, social media posts, and behind-the-scenes footage hinted at a man struggling to stay afloat. Bandmates later recalled moments of quiet tension, smiles that didn't reach his eyes, and a sense that something vital was missing beneath his energy. These were early signals that the person behind the performer was battling a private, intense storm. At this stage, the conflict was invisible to most outsiders, yet unmistakable to those paying attention. The songs became a mirror of Chester's inner world, revealing a despair that contrasted sharply with the band's public image of resilience and unity. Listeners singing along didn't always grasp it, but in retrospect, the music was already charting a path toward tragedy. This is the point where suspicion begins, when the lyrics, the tone, and the performances all start to align, hinting at a reality that few dared to see at the time. Chester's personal turmoil was no longer hidden entirely, it was woven into the songs themselves, waiting to be recognized too late. The release of One More Light marked a turning point unlike anything Linkin Park had experienced before. To many, it was a bold, emotional departure, a collection of intimate, vulnerable songs that stripped away the band's aggressive facade. To Chester, however, it was more than music, it was a reflection of the battles he could no longer hide. Tracks like One More Light and Heavy carried an almost prophetic weight, their lyrics touching on themes of grief, isolation, and the fragility of life. The songs spoke directly from Chester's heart, resonating with fans who sensed an honesty that was raw and unsettling. The heavier, external aggression of earlier albums had given way to introspection and quiet desperation. Critics were divided. Some praised the album's honesty, while others criticized it for being too soft, too different. Yet the real tension wasn't in public opinion, it was internal. Behind the scenes, Chester's struggles intensified. Friends and bandmates would later describe moments of profound sadness masked by laughter, energy drained into performances while inner turmoil deepened. This was the moment when the music stopped being just entertainment. It became a mirror, reflecting a man in conflict with himself. The turning point wasn't dramatic or explosive in the way some might expect. It was quiet, almost invisible, but its consequences were devastating. The lyrics, the tone, and Chester's presence all pointed toward a truth that the world would only fully recognize after tragedy struck. At this breaking point, the seeds planted in earlier albums bloomed into a pattern that could no longer be ignored. One More Light didn't just mark a new era for the band, it marked the beginning of the final chapter of Chester's life, one written in melodies, verses, and whispers that few had fully understood. The shock of Chester Bennington's death in 2017 sent ripples through the music world and beyond. Fans who had once sung along to his anthems began to revisit every lyric with new eyes, uncovering lines that now seemed hauntingly prophetic. Songs that had previously felt like emotional releases took on a new, almost unbearable weight, transforming into epitaphs of a life cut tragically short. For Linkin Park, the impact was immediate and profound. Bandmates struggled to reconcile their grief with the reality that their friend, brother, and creative partner was gone. Public tributes poured in, concerts were canceled, and the music community mourned a voice that had defined an era. Behind the scenes, the scars were deeper: unresolved guilt, unanswered questions, and the haunting feeling that they had missed signs that Chester needed help. The ripple effect extended to fans worldwide. Social media became a space for collective mourning, with people sharing personal stories of how Chester's words had saved them, or tragically failed to reach him in time. The tragedy illuminated a painful truth: even when pain is shared through art, it does not always reach the audience in the way the artist intends. Moreover, Chester's death brought attention to the delicate balance between fame and mental health. His struggles, now widely known, sparked conversations about depression, addiction, and the hidden battles that public figures endure. What was once private pain had become a cultural moment, forcing a society to confront how it perceives and supports artists. In the aftermath, the music itself became both a memorial and a warning. Every song, every lyric, every note of Chester's voice now carried echoes of loss and reflection, a permanent reminder of the scars left behind when brilliance and vulnerability collide. In the months and years following Chester's passing, the surviving members of Linkin Park began piecing together not just their grief, but also the hidden messages embedded in his final works. Interviews, old footage, and behind-the-scenes stories revealed moments that had previously gone unnoticed, gestures, pauses, and lyrics that, in retrospect, seemed to carry desperate warnings. Bandmates recounted how Chester had often masked his deepest struggles with humor and energy, performing at full intensity even on days when he felt he could barely get out of bed. They spoke of private conversations where he confessed feelings of despair that never made it to the public. These revelations painted a picture of a man whose pain was both intimately known to those closest to him and frustratingly invisible to the wider world. Fans, too, began to notice layers in the songs that had previously been overlooked. Melodies once interpreted as simple emotional expressions were now understood as complex reflections of Chester's inner battles. Subtle phrasing, recurring themes, and lyrical patterns suddenly took on new meaning, as if each track contained fragments of a private diary intended to be discovered only after tragedy. This period of reflection also sparked a broader conversation about mental health in the music industry. Chester's struggles became a catalyst for awareness, encouraging other artists to speak openly and for fans to seek help without shame. In this way, even amidst profound loss, a form of reconstruction took place, not just for the band but for the community that had grown up with his music. Ultimately, the revelations confirmed what many had suspected. Chester's art was a testament to his vulnerability, a map of his pain, and a message of connection that extended far beyond the stage. It was a reminder that even in tragedy, understanding and healing could emerge, layer by layer, through careful reflection on the words and voice he left behind. Chester Bennington's story is a reminder of the fragile line between brilliance and suffering. His voice continues to resonate, not only through the anthems that defined a generation, but also through the subtle, haunting messages hidden in his lyrics. Messages that fans only fully recognized after his passing. Each song, each verse, each scream carries the weight of a life lived intensely, beautifully, and tragically. As we reflect on his journey, we see more than a tragic end. We see a man who poured his heart into music, who shared his pain openly yet privately, and who connected with millions through vulnerability. His struggles remind us that even those who seem strongest on the outside may be fighting battles unseen, and that empathy and awareness can sometimes make the difference between despair and hope. Chester's legacy is both cautionary and inspiring. It urges artists, fans, and everyone who listens closely to pay attention, not just to the music but to the people behind it. In the echoes of his final songs, we hear a call to care, to listen, and to cherish each fleeting moment. His life may have ended too soon, but his voice and the truths it carried remain eternal. Through this story, we honor not only his talent but also his humanity, reminding ourselves that behind every lyric, behind every stage, there is a human being whose struggles matter, whose life mattered, and whose memory can continue to teach us empathy, resilience, and the power of connection. As if the story of Chester Bennington wasn't already haunting enough, there's another layer that deepens the mystery. Just weeks before his death, Chester had publicly mourned the loss of Chris Cornell, his friend and fellow icon of rock, who had also taken his own life.
In light of our dear friend Chris Cornell passing away, we decided to play our song One More Light.
The parallels between their struggles, their voices, and the timing of these tragedies sent shockwaves through the music world, leaving fans to wonder about fate, coincidence, and the unseen weight carried by those who seem larger than life. Some fans speculate about the connections hidden in lyrics, interviews, and social media posts, patterns that hint at shared battles with depression, pressure, and the isolating nature of fame. Others see it as a chilling reminder that even the brightest voices can falter under immense personal pain. What is certain is that Chester's death, intertwined with Cornell's, transformed both of their legacies into a somber reflection on mental health in the rock world. This epilogue invites us to look deeper, not just at the lyrics or performances, but at the lives behind the music. It asks a haunting question: how many other stories remain hidden behind the smiles, the screams, and the stage lights? For fans and for the world, the echoes of Chester and Chris continue to resonate, leaving a mixture of grief, awe, and an urgent call to pay attention to the invisible battles that too often go unnoticed. And as we close this chapter, the mystery lingers, reminding us that the story of Linkin Park and of Chester Bennington is far from fully understood, and that sometimes, the music itself is the only map to the human soul it comes from.